Would you pay $1.1 million for a home in Montreal that you could rebuild for only $900,000? In this video, we're going to explain why we see that happen sometimes in the Montreal market and why sometimes it's actually the inverse effect. If you stay to the very end, I will give you my opinion on whether it's worth to buy something rebuild entirely or look for a finished product instead. My name is LJ Ginaga. I'm a real estate broker here in Montreal with LJ Realties. I've been a realtor for the last 17 years. I also have a property management company called Plex Doctor, helping owners take the hassle out of property management. And we make sure to help at least 115 families year over year buy or sell real estate in the greater Montreal area. So if you're thinking of making a move with your family, whether that's for investment or for your own purchases for a single family home, condo, anything of that nature, feel free to book a meeting with me. There's a description or a link down in the description, pardon me. And I can't wait to meet with you and start the investing journey with you and go deeper in whatever this case might be for yourself. So I want to give a huge shout out to one of our clients who reached out to us and gave us the idea of this video. We always love to hear from you, our viewers, on ideas of questions that you have that are associated to real estate, because if you have the question, there's a really good chance that somebody else is having the same question. So feel free to send me a note, put a comment in one of the videos, and we'll put together a video to answer the question for you and everybody else. So in this video, why is it that sometimes we see properties that are worth one price, but the rebuild cost is something else? How much is rebuild cost really in Montreal right now? What does it look like? And what are some of the different factors that affect this? So we're gonna break this all down for you. Without further ado, let's get right into it. To start things off, let's have a couple of clear definitions for the process of rebuilding. The first thing we're going to discuss is hard costs. What are hard costs? Well, very straightforward. That has to do with all of your construction costs. We're talking masonry, foundation, windows, doors, finishings, mechanical, electrical, plumbing, demolition costs, everything that has to do with the actual build that we're doing, that's going to be part of your hard costs. Then we have our soft costs. Soft costs do not actually have to do with the build, but you require them in order to build. So some examples of that are going to be your architects, your permits, your plans, your engineers, maybe a lobbyist that you had to pay to get your plans approved at the city or push forward at least in front of the right eyes. Anything that has to do on that front, interest expenses, mortgage brokers, real estate brokers, all that kind of stuff, that's all going to be part of your soft costs associated to the project. Next, we have our time costs. So obviously we had interest expenses that we discussed in the soft costs. Now, if we have to hold a property for longer than we were expecting, we thought this was going to be a 12-month project, and all of a sudden it's an 18 or 24-month project, that's going to incur some costs associated to them as well. What if you were planning on building this property in spring, summer, fall, but all of a sudden everything's been extended and now you have to pay for winter conditions? There's gonna be additional costs associated to that as well. So timing plays a role in this as well, and those are some costs that might be attributed to your time costs. And finally, let's define some insurance terms. So let's start off with actual cash value, which is the depreciated cost. Maybe you had a property that had a roof that was 5 years old. You're only gonna get funded back for a roof that has maybe 75% left of the useful life left on it. The same thing will apply for windows, your floors, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So even though the property might cost you $1 million to rebuild today, your insurance company might only pay out $700,000 because that's what is adjusted after depreciation. Next, we have my personal favorite, which is the replacement value. That's where they're gonna pay for the entire rebuild cost in today's prices, right? That's obviously the most expensive coverage, but when you do have an issue and you are looking to use your insurer, you want that replacement value because you want them to be covering absolutely everything. You don't want any headaches about, oh, now you're short funds. You're paying for insurance for a reason, and if you do have to use it, in my case, I seldom use the insurance unless it's a really big claim. I wanna make sure they're gonna cover everything for me the way I had it before, or even better possibly. Finally, we also have the code upgraded coverage. What that means is that it's very common for the construction code to change over the years. Typically every 5 to 10 years, we'll see a new version of this book come out. And sometimes, or in every rendition, there are upgrades to the code that are done. All this means is that if your property was built, let's say 25 years ago, and since then there's been a couple of code upgrades, they're gonna build it to the same specs it was built originally, but they will include any code upgrades along the way without any additional cost to you. What that means typically is that you didn't pay for replacement. So that means that if you upgraded your floors or upgraded your kitchen, you're not gonna get those upgrades. It's gonna be built back to the same spec it was originally, but on this code upgraded version, you're gonna get the upgrades of code so that you are conformed to the new current codes. With that behind us, let's discuss why market value does not always equal rebuild cost. There's 6 different factors that influence them. I'm gonna start breaking them down one by one for you so we can really get into why this happens, and more importantly, why sometimes it's actually the inverse, which is really weird, but we do see it in our market sometimes. So let's start off with the number one thing, land value and scarcity. Obviously, if we're in some of the most prestigious neighborhoods in Montreal, there's a lot less land available, and because of that, that land is going to have a pretty significant value. That's why we see, even in some cases, people sell properties for land value only, even though they do have a property on them. What that means is that the property on it is probably worthless or it is in decrepit condition. Therefore, they're really selling it just for the land, but the building is still there. So you're actually going to have a bit of demolition costs associated to getting rid of that as well. This is the main driver behind the difference between rebuild costs and market value. There are a couple other factors that we're about to explore, but this is typically what is driving 99% of the cases. Next, we have zoning and potential. Zoning can be very different from municipality to municipality. It can also be very different from one street to the next. So it's very important before you get into any project of this nature, you've gone to the city and make sure that the zoning is appropriate for what you're looking to do. If you have questions or unsure, make sure you do not move forward with the purchase until you've cleared this up, because if you cannot actually execute the project that you were planning on doing, the property that you're looking to buy might be worthless to you, and you have to be very careful with this. On the potential side of this segment, sometimes in properties you can add units, you can densify, you can build in the back. So again, it all comes down to going to the city, making sure you understand what can be built on the property, and making sure that you're making the right move for your project in particular. Next up, we've got character and heritage. Montreal is a very old city that is filled with character and heritage. We've got some properties dating back to as early as the 1700s I've seen, but we have a lot of properties from the early 1900s, and obviously they all come with tons of character and charm. When we are looking at the price of rebuilding costs, a lot of the things that were done back in the early 1900s are very, very difficult to replicate today, even though the municipalities obviously want us to keep this heritage and replicate it. And more importantly, they're very, very expensive. So if you are interested in doing a project in a neighborhood that is very cultural or has heritage implications, above and beyond all the permits and restrictions you're gonna have to deal with on that front, understand that your budget is gonna have to be significantly larger because of these restrictions, because of the fact that for certain arts and trades nowadays, there might only be 3 people left in the city of Montreal or the province of Quebec that do that. It happened to me in a conversation with our contractor last week, actually, that for one very specific thing that we have to rebuild, there's nobody left in the city that has that art skill, and therefore the cost to do it is really expensive. Number 4, friction and time. You've all heard the expression, time is money. And when you're looking to do a project, I promise you, time is always a lot longer than originally anticipated. Along with that, we've got friction, whether that's with the municipality, with the city, with whoever you're dealing with in order to get your permits approved. These things slow things down. And obviously because of that, that is a factor you have to consider. And that's a factor that is very difficult to quantify in the value of a home that's already built versus something that you're about to go into the endeavor of building. A next important factor is the financing environment. We've seen very different financing environments over the course of the last 5 years. We've seen interest rates as low as 1.5% and as high as about 6.5% over the span of a 2-year period. Because of this, projects can change dramatically in a very short period of time, and that's going to have a very different impact in the value and the cost. At the beginning of COVID, we also had material costs go through the roof, and there was a huge labor shortage as well. So all of these things can play a huge factor into whether it makes sense or doesn't make sense for your project. And finally, behavior and emotion. The reality is, as humans, we are very emotional in nature, especially if we're thinking about where our family is going to live and set down roots. Because of that, we see it quite regularly that sometimes somebody's looking for a very specific and small radius. Maybe that's because of the proximity to their schools, to work, to daycares, to family. Sometimes people want to be very, very close to where they grew up. So because of all these reasons, somebody might be willing to pay an unreasonable price for one property that is not aligned with fair market value at all. The same thing happens when somebody puts way too much money into a property for that street. I've seen it a couple times where somebody wanted the very best of everything, top of the line, crazy upgrades across the board in a neighborhood that just didn't justify it. So they were all in at a price that didn't make sense, and therefore when they went to go resell the property, they had to understand that they were going to lose money, and they were okay with that because they got the use that they were looking for out of the property during that period of time, and it just made sense to them, even though they were technically upside down on the numbers of it. If you can score one of those deals, well, good for you, because obviously you're getting premium top-end things at below the cost it would be to build this out, which is an amazing situation to be in. Now let's talk about some of the things that really impact rebuild costs or new construction costs. With the project that I've been building on Charlevoix Street, where we're doing a 9-unit build, we're gonna have 8 residential rental units, and we're gonna have 1 commercial space. We're actually moving the offices of LJ Realties and Flex Doctor. I've learned a lot about what goes into this and what can go wrong, what can go great, and what to consider along the way. So what I want to do for you is break down some of the things that were hard learning lessons for me and things that I probably wouldn't do the same if I had another opportunity to. The very first thing that has come up in this project specifically is that we were locked in without a back alley. So we didn't have a back alley, which, okay, it happens from time to time, but obviously what that meant is that everything we had to build, we had to kind of build from the back to the front. And if we needed access to anything else after we put up the structure, we needed permission obviously from our neighbors to get through, or we'd have to crane it over the top of the building and bring it down. That has increased costs across the board on just about everything we wanted to do. And knowing that now, I might have looked to do a different project on that piece of land than the one I had to do. The second thing that was a tough pill to swallow was the fact that because we have a commercial portion of it and we have it on an exterior wall, the fire code on commercial is very different than the fire code on residential properties. Because we had it integrated inside and wrapped, but with an exterior wall, we had to basically build a steel structure that surrounded the commercial section to fireproof that independently, and then we could build around it. And that has been an adventure in its own, is the reality. So I would very much recommend that if you are limited in your access points to the property and how you're building it, keep it as simple as possible. Make it a much simpler structure. Don't try and go too fancy with that kind of stuff, because that has added a lot of cost to it for us. Now, again, we're putting our offices in there. We're really excited about this building long term. It will work out in the end, but again, it's been a very stressful process throughout. Time would be the next thing I want to discuss. We bought this piece of land in November 2020, and it is now almost fall 2025, and we are not in construction right now. And it's looking like it's going to be ready for early 2026 at this point in time. So that means that it's going to have been more than 5 years from the time we acquired the land to the time that we will have had a finished project. There's a variety of reasons why that's been the case. The first one being when we bought it, it was the middle of COVID. So when we started discussing with the city and starting to see what we could put on it and going through the CCU and PPCMOA, all these kinds of things, there was a lot of barriers because the people who needed to be involved in the process were working from home, they were working remotely. One of the things that we saw happen very, very often was that we usually need to speak to 2 or 3 people at the city, but they were never working the same day of the week in the office. So getting them together on a call, getting them together to brainstorm, to discuss, to come to a decision effectively was a very difficult process. And that's something that should not be the case right now. But even with the upcoming election that's coming not too far down the road right now, this is something that a lot of people want to speed up. They want to make sure that if we're going through a housing crisis, we can build more houses and at a faster pace. And everyone understands that there's a lot of red tape, but we're going to have to start cutting through some of that. All this to say, whatever timeline you budgeted or allotted yourself, I'd almost say give yourself double. It sounds crazy. It sounds like way too much, but the reality is I did not think it was going to take 5.5 years almost to build this project. I've been talking about this project and how we're going to be moving our offices in the near future, probably for the last 3 client appreciation dinners that we've done. And this has been a huge learning experience for me along the way. Another cost that was surprisingly larger than we were expecting was our decontamination costs. We knew that the lot had some contamination. We had done the testing. And to be honest, it wasn't anything in particular. There had just been an old building on the property. And when they demolished that, they had left the bricks and some of the construction material in the earth. And that's considered a contaminant as far as the construction services are considered. So when we were getting rid of that earth, because obviously we were digging a huge hole to build the foundation, we had to be testing it along the way. And then we got to decide if we were sending it to one dump site or another dump site based on the classification of that earth mixed with whatever construction materials were on there. That ended up taking significantly longer and was significantly more expensive than we were expecting, because it turns out they had to test every single individual tank that we were sending off. And that also ended up being a lot more expensive than we were expecting along the way. The final tip I have, if you are going to go down this venture, is make sure that you get fixed pricing on everything. We had a cost control meeting in the last couple of weeks, and there's one item that effectively is looking like it's going to cost us twice as much as we had originally budgeted. And this item was carpentry. Obviously, if you're building a 9-unit, almost like 9,400 square feet total, there's a lot of carpentry that's going to go into that. And the reality is, in this case, because of the way the structure was built with the steel component added onto the next one, the budget that the carpentry company had originally given us has now been blown out of the water, and effectively it will end up costing almost double what the original budget was. So this was a huge mishap along the way. We'd originally had a couple of fixed pricing quotes on this, and when the time came, because of the structure setup, once they saw it built there, they effectively walked off the job. So we were kind of left in a pinch. It wasn't the way we were looking to do things, but again, knowing what I know now, we would have probably put the project on hold until we had a concrete idea and a fixed price on this, because numbers kept changing all over the place, and you want to have as much stability when building a project of that size. As you embark on your journey to start building something, you obviously want to have an idea of what is the cost per square foot of construction. I would say that a standard project that has easy accessibility is probably in the range of $250 to $300 a square foot. That's really closer to the reality of what you're seeing. If the project is really, really complicated, it might be $400 to $500 a square foot. I think our Charlevoix project is somewhere in that $425 to $450 range based on all of the hurdles that we've gone through along the way. So it really depends on the project. It depends on a lot of things, but if you are going to be budgeting yourself, I would recommend that you budget conservatively and give yourself a $300 per square foot. It also gives you buffer. It gives you a little bit of margin. And if you can keep it under that, well, all the power to you. You're going to be making an even better profit, even better project. But for budget purposes, that would be the number that I'm using in the Montreal market right now on my end. Something interesting that's happening in the Montreal market right now is that as construction costs continue to go up and up and up, we're seeing it become a reality that it's probably less expensive to purchase an existing property right now than it is to go out to build something on your own, whether that's demolition and rebuild or just buy empty land and build on that. Because the value of our land in Montreal has become quite expensive because of the scarcity that we have here. We are an island after all. There is no more land to go out and get. And the fact that construction costs have gone up considerably since the beginning of the pandemic 5 years ago. The reality is, more times than not, it's probably going to be less expensive to buy an existing property than to go out and build something. Now again, if it has always been your dream to make your dream home with all of your finishings, whatever you want, then by all means, go do that. But I would highly recommend, if possible, and if you're looking to do this and save a little bit of money, your best bet is to find a structure. So find a property that is the size that you want, that has everything you want, and go inside and finish the interior to your liking. That's probably the balance of the best of both worlds, where you're getting to get all of your finishings, everything that you want. You have a shell that is the way you want it to be, and you can really work within that. That's probably the best of both worlds as far as I'm seeing right now. So now that I just gave you what the cost per square foot is to budget, why don't we look at a couple different examples? So let's say you wanted to build a house, single family home that is about 2,500 square feet. So not a very large house is the reality. We're talking about a bungalow that's got 1,200 square feet or 1,250 per floor. At that $300 square foot that I just quoted you before, that means that the construction cost is going to be $750,000. That is a huge figure because I haven't even spoken about what the value of the land is going to be there. You're probably not going to find land anywhere desirable for less than $200,000, $300,000, $400,000. So if I go $750,000 plus that $300,000, that means that I will have paid $1,050,000 for that property. We're talking about a bungalow. Yes, it'll be brand new, beautiful, everything you want, but there's not a ton of bungalows on the island of Montreal that are worth over $1 million right now. If we look at something even bigger, obviously that number is going to get exponentially larger. What if we were to look at something smaller? Well, let's say you want to build a townhome that's maybe 1,500 square feet. Well, obviously now we're going to reduce that pretty significantly, but still, that number is quite large. Construction costs of $450,000 to build a 1,500 square feet of living space, that's pretty explosive. Especially you tack on the land value associated to that. Again, you're looking at a minimum of $300,000, maybe $200,000 because it's a lot smaller parcel of land. We're still at $450,000 plus $200,000, you're at $650,000 all in for a townhome. There's gonna be a lot of townhomes that you can get for a lower price than that, or for about that price that are quite new without the headaches that come along with it. So again, it really is going to depend on a case-by-case basis of what you're looking for. If we are going down the multiplex road, obviously then these numbers are going to get significantly larger because most plexes, especially the plexes that you're going to want to build out, you're looking at about 1,000 square feet per floor. Let's say you're building a triplex. Now we're at 3,000 square feet. I mean, your construction costs, we're looking at $900,000 plus the cost of the land acquisition. Assume $400,000, let's say in this case, 400 plus the 9, you're at $1.3 million. That's probably right on par with what you're going to pay today for a property that's brand new, that's or very new, if you will, in excellent condition. So is it going to be worth it? Tough to justify it, really. And again, finding that piece of land is probably going to be really, really difficult. At the beginning of the video, I promised you that I would tell you if I think it's worth building from scratch or buying new. And I think you can probably guess that based on what I just told you, more times than not, it is not worth it to build new. The reality is that financially speaking, it's almost never worth it, right? Unless you're building a very large scale apartment building and it's not for your personal use, that's where financially it's probably gonna make the most sense. But whenever you're building for yourself, you just don't have the economies of scale. And therefore you have to understand that you're gonna be paying a premium for this. Now, yes, you will have it for a very long time. The property will be in excellent condition for 20, 30, 40 years. You can build it to all the specs that you want, whatever you want of that nature. But is it worth it? The time, the friction, the headaches, the delays, the everything that comes along with it? Probably not. you can probably get a much better deal and a much better property that you can just renovate to your taste if you do it the other way. So that is my recommendation to you. And again, this is always case by case. It really varies from one person to the next. But as a global statement, that's what I'm going with here. If you've been thinking about selling, rebuilding, or adding units in Montreal, reach out to me. I'd love to be your real estate partner for this project. Again, there's a link down in the description below. Book a 15-minute strategy call with me. We can discuss a couple different options, see if we're a good fit to work together, and then from there, we can move on to the next steps. Thank you so much for watching this video. I can't wait to catch you on the next one.